On the afternoon of June 6, 1944, Sergeant James McKnight found himself crouched behind a shattered stone wall in Normandy. The time was precisely 2:37 p.m. Through the dust and smoke, he watched as 18 German Panzers advanced in perfect, terrifying formation across a wheat field. It was yet another impossible mission. The German tanks were simply too powerful, their armor too thick, their speed too great. The American bazookas they carried felt like pea shooters, barely capable of scratching the frontal armor of these steel beasts. For an Allied infantryman, the odds of survival in such an encounter were practically zero. To take down a single Panzer IV with the weapons they had, a soldier needed to land an average of 8 to 12 direct hits on the Arma's specific weak points. Most men died before they could even land one successful shot. The Germans knew this. Their commanders had meticulously studied American tactics, knew every single limitation of Allied anti-tank weapons, and openly mocked them. But that afternoon, something different rested on Sergeant McKnight's shoulder. It was a weapon that German engineers considered a technical impossibility. It was something that a Wehrmacht general, hearing the rumors, would have dismissed as pure American fantasy. It was a radio-guided flying bomb. McKnight steadied his aim and pulled the trigger. He fired 3 shots in rapid succession. The first missile soared past its target, missing by mere meters. But the second one was different. It didn't need to hit. It exploded just 15 meters from the lead Panzer. In an instant, the German tank erupted in a massive fireball right in the middle of the field. What unfolded over the next 4 hours would forever alter the course of the war in Europe. It would lead to the destruction of 18 Panzers that never saw the attack coming. Their technological superiority rendered obsolete in a matter of minutes. The journey of this revolutionary weapon began 2 years earlier, in 1942. The problem was clear. Conventional rockets were inefficient. They only detonated on direct impact or at a preset time, making them almost useless against fast-moving, armored targets. The theoretical solution was simple, elegant, even: create a projectile that could detect when it was near a target and explode automatically. But the practical application was a nightmare. It required cramming a sophisticated radio guidance system inside a portable rocket. When the idea was presented to the National Defense Research Committee, the response was a swift and unanimous impossible. A guided missile would need a transmitter, a receiver, gyroscopes for stability, and a functional warhead, all packed into a device a single soldier could carry. Not only that, but this delicate piece of technology had to withstand the violent force of launch, fly at high speed, and maintain enough stability to hit a moving target. It was a list of insurmountable challenges. But one man, Dr. Charles Stark Draper of MIT, refused to accept impossible as an answer. His team plunged into 18 months of intense, top-secret work. They labored day and night, creating miniaturized gyroscopes, revolutionary flight control systems, and innovative shaped warheads that could punch through armor. The final result was officially designated the remote-controlled bazooka in government documents. But the soldiers who would use it gave it a simpler, more descriptive nickname: the cigarette box, thanks to its distinctive rectangular shape. The device weighed only 16 kilograms and was a marvel of engineering. It worked by emitting radio signals. When these signals bounced off a large metal object nearby, like a tank, the reflected waves would trigger the detonator, causing a devastating explosion in close proximity to the target. In March of 1944, the new weapon was put to the test at the Aberdeen Proving Ground, unleashed against moving targets in the stark Nevada desert. The setup was simple. 5 obsolete tanks were set in motion. The results were anything but. 7 shots were fired. 5 tanks were utterly destroyed. The army was so impressed they canceled the remaining tests and immediately ordered mass production. But this success created a critical problem: secrecy. The weapon was a game changer, and its existence had to be guarded at all costs. If a cigarette box missile fell into enemy hands, Nazi engineers could potentially replicate it, or, even worse, quickly develop countermeasures, neutralizing its effectiveness. The decision from high command was clear and absolute. The cigarette boxers would only be deployed in operations where recovery by the enemy was impossible, or in situations where the element of surprise would be so devastatingly complete that it wouldn't matter if the secret got out afterward. Colonel Thompson himself personally escorted the first 2,000 units to England in April of 1944. From there, General Omar Bradley distributed the precious ammunition to just 3 divisions, operating near the Normandy beaches, one of which was the 29th Infantry Division. The 29th had been taking a brutal beating for the past 3 months. They had fired over 8,000 conventional rockets and had managed to destroy only 6 enemy tanks. That's a staggering rate of 1,333 rockets for every single kill. The new weapon couldn't have come at a better time. On June 5, 1944, the day before the invasion, the division received a special delivery of 300 of these missiles. The crews were trained in absolute secrecy, told only that they were handling a new type of ammunition. The crates were marked simply as Type 7. The next morning, on June 6, the 29th Division stormed Omaha Beach, charging into a wall of heavy German fire. The fighting was bloody and relentless. By 2 p.m., after hours of brutal combat, a new threat emerged. German armored units were spotted moving towards the American position. 18 Panzer, IVs, and 3 formidable Tiger tanks crested the hills, their silhouettes a promise of death. One of them fired, and an American Sherman tank was destroyed in a single, fiery shot. The German tanks advanced to a range of 1,200 meters. Well outside the effective range of the Allies' conventional artillery, they were preparing to pick the Americans apart from a safe distance. But Sergeant McKnight had his orders. Test the new ammunition. He fired 3 shots in just 6 seconds. The first missile exploded harmlessly near a barn, but the second detonated just 15 meters from one of the Panzers. The airburst explosion sent hundreds of lethal shrapnel fragments tearing through the air in every direction. The German tank caught fire and exploded violently. The third shot detonated near another Panzer, shredding its tracks and leaving it crippled and exposed. 2 enemy tanks were neutralized with just 3 shots. The men of the 29th were stunned into silence. The official artillery report later stated, with considerable understatement, the value of the Type 7 missile cannot be overstated. In the weeks and months following DA, the Germans began to realize that something had fundamentally changed on the battlefield. Veteran tank crews started reporting inexplicable, almost ghostly experiences. Panzers were being destroyed by explosions in the air, without any direct impact. Commander Otokarius, one of Germany's most decorated tank aces, noted in a report that American projectiles were now exploding near his Panzer, even when they missed, as if they knew where we were. German military intelligence scrambled to figure out what was happening. They intercepted rumors from American prisoners about a new type of ammunition, but the descriptions sounded like science fiction. A German naval intelligence report from July 1944 concluded, the descriptions are technically implausible, likely disinformation or exaggeration. They simply couldn't believe it was possible to put a functional radio system inside a portable rocket. The idea was absurd. General Heinz Guderian, the father of the Blitzkrieg, reportedly made a sarcastic comment on the matter. He quipped that if the Americans were putting radios inside portable rockets, they might as well start putting entire factories inside every soldier. They laughed it off as fantasy, while on the fields of France, their steel titans continued to burn. By the end of 1944, a quiet industrial revolution was underway in the United States. In 83 factories across the country, 57 different companies were churning out 15,000 units per day of a top-secret weapon. ET's code name the Cigarette Box. In July of that year, this unassuming device found its perfect target. The German Tiger tanks. These steel behemoths were the spearhead of the German army, slow-moving but seemingly unstoppable forces against Allied infantry. With conventional rockets, hitting a moving tank was a game of inches and split-second timing. The margin for error was razor-thin. But the Cigarette Box changed the rules entirely. It didn't need a direct hit. The missile was designed to explode when it got close to the tank, making the margin of error almost irrelevant. Military historian Stephen Ambrose vividly described one of its first major uses during Operation Cobra. He wrote of a battlefield flickering with rocket flashes, with smoke and tank turrets, and bright fireballs on the horizon, testifying to the incredible precision of this new anti-tank artillery. In one engagement, 9 out of 15 attacking Tiger tanks were destroyed, saving an entire Allied armored column from annihilation. The secret was out, at least on the battlefield. Throughout 1944, The impact of the cigarette box was staggering. It was responsible for a full 60% of all German tank kills, even though it made up only 20% of the ammunition fired. This meant it was 400% more efficient than any conventional rocket. The psychological effect was just as potent. The once unshakable confidence of German tank commanders began to crumble. Their deadliest weapon was suddenly vulnerable. The story of the 29th Infantry Division is a testament to both the power and the peril of this new technology. They were the first to use the cigarette boxers in combat, and they became masters of it. On the night of September 17, 1944, near Arnhem, they faced a German armored column in open terrain. At 3:17 a.m., they opened fire. Their rate of fire was devastating. 12 missiles per minute. In just 21 minutes, 8 German Panzers were torn to shreds. But then, disaster struck. The 29th had exhausted their entire supply of the special ammunition. They were forced to switch back to conventional rockets, which started failing, bouncing harmlessly off the enemy armor. Suddenly, the hunters became their position exposed. 3 German 88mm guns zeroed in on them. The retaliation was swift and brutal. 23 American soldiers were killed instantly. Over 200 survivors were trapped behind enemy lines, forced to hide in abandoned farmhouses for 6 days before a daring reconnaissance operation could rescue them. The men of the 29th, the pioneers of this new warfare, now lay in military cemeteries scattered across France. Between June 1944 and the end of the war, the cigarette box fundamentally shifted the balance of power in Europe. The numbers speak for themselves. To destroy a Panzer, it took an average of 800 shots with conventional ammunition. With the proximity-fused missiles, it took only 42. During the critical Battle of the Bulge, the 101st Airborne Division used the cigarette boxers to destroy 53 German tanks in just 2 days, a feat that would have been impossible just months earlier. The weapon's effectiveness did not go unnoticed by the top brass. General Dwight Eisenhower himself wrote that the new missile was devastating and declared that a new method of armored warfare will need to be created. By the war's end, over 8 million cigarette boxers had been produced. The Germans, who'd initially mocked the idea of a remote-controlled rocket, never managed to develop a comparable technology. They paid for this failure with the loss of hundreds of tanks, and ultimately, it contributed to their defeat. The people behind this revolution were just as remarkable as the technology itself. Colonel Thompson, the man who had personally escorted the first shipment of missiles to Europe, moved on to his next vital project, studying captured German V-2 rockets, and Sergeant James McKnight, the first soldier to test what his superiors deemed impossible technology, survived the war. He went on to become a physics professor in Ohio, his incredible story of the 4 minutes that changed the war never forgotten. The cigarette box did more than just destroy tanks. It democratized anti-tank warfare. Before, the sound of a Panzer's track sent infantry scrambling for cover. Now, soldiers held their ground. They waited. They knew they had a fighting chance. This psychological shift was as powerful as the weapon itself. German commanders, once eager for direct confrontation, began to actively avoid American infantry units. In October 1944, captured, documents revealed a stunning new order from the German High Command. Avoid close engagement with American infantry units, equipped with new intermediate range anti-tank weaponry. It was an implicit admission that their armored superiority was over. The legacy of the cigarette box extends far beyond World War II. The proximity-fused technology. The secret to its success became the foundation for modern guided missiles, air defense systems, and even the airbag technology in your car. The core principle of detecting proximity and triggering an automatic reaction revolutionized not just warfare, but civilian safety as well. In 1947, the project files were partially declared, revealing the true name of the weapon. Operation Check. It was a fitting name for a weapon that had so decisively ended the reign of the Panzer tank in Europe. The brilliant engineers who worked on the project were awarded the Presidential Medal of Merit, but their names remained classified for another 30 years. One of those engineers, Dr. Charles Stark Draper, continued his groundbreaking work, developing the inertial navigation systems that would guide the Apollo missions to the moon. When asked later in life about the cigarette box, he said something profound. We didn't just invent a weapon. We invented the idea that electronics could think faster than a human in combat. He was right. The cigarette box was the first step toward the smart missiles and combat drones of today. It was the moment warfare began to shift from brute force to a primitive form of artificial intelligence. For the veterans who used it, the memory was complex. The men of the 29th Division rarely spoke about the cigarette box after the war. Many wrestled with the knowledge that they had wielded a secret weapon that gave the enemy no chance to react. Some called it an unfair advantage. But in the brutal calculus of war, superior technology saves the lives of your own. Decades later, in 1984, a memorial ceremony was held in Normandy. An American veteran was approached by a former German Panzer commander, now in his 70s. The German man asked a question that had haunted him for 40 years. How did you do it? How did you make those rockets explode without hitting us? The American veteran smiled a little. You never knew about the cigarette boxers, did you? The German shook his head. We never heard of it, he replied. We just thought you had better artillery. And that was the final, incredible irony. The most revolutionary ground weapon of the war in Europe was so secret that the enemy never even knew it existed. They only knew that, suddenly, they were losing. Today, you can see replicas of the cigarette box at the National World War II Museum in New Orleans and the Imperial War Museum in London. They are relics of a bygone era, marking the end of massive tank-and-tank battles and the dawn of guided precision. And it all started on a battlefield in Normandy, with a single sergeant holding a weapon his enemies called impossible, but which he simply called a cigarette box. 4 minutes later, 18 Panzers were gone, and the face of war had been changed forever. Thanks for watching. If you found this piece of hidden history as fascinating as I did, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more stories you won't find in the standard history books. See you next time.